So The Outer Worlds released for the Nintendo Switch on Friday, June the 5th, and I gotta say, it's a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, you've got the entire game running on the Nintendo Switch, which is impressive in of itself. A large Fallout 3, Fallout 4 style game certainly demands a lot of resources, and coupled with running on Unreal Engine 4, the game actually running in handheld mode on the Switch is certainly an achievement. But on the other hand, the game suffers from low resolution textures, poor frame rates, and is by far the worst version of the game, and it doesn't look very good in both docked and handheld modes, especially in handheld mode, which is running at 540p. It somewhat reminds me of the port that was made on the PlayStation Vita of Borderlands 2. It's cool that it exists, but beyond that, it's not really any fun unless you overclock the PlayStation Vita. So what then happens if we overclock the Nintendo Switch port of The Outer Worlds? Can we squeeze more performance out of the game? Or perhaps can we improve the visuals? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. Now, for reference, at stock clocks, although Virtuos told us that the game would run at 1080p, in docked mode, running through the wasteland, it's running at 720p, and while the game does hit 30 frames per second, it does struggle as new assets are streamed in. In town or during a firefight, the game can struggle to keep its frame rate, and Digital Foundry made an excellent video on this subject, discussing that it could drop into the low 20s at times, especially as you advance further into the game. Now, the captures I've done are from the first hour or so I'm not seeing any dips that low, but it's fair to say that the frame rates are not good. In handheld mode, the resolution then drops to 540p, but actually the game performs a little smoother. This makes me believe that the CPU is causing the bottleneck. Since the game has dropped to 540p, the frame rate is smoother because the constant here is the CPU, which is locked at 1 GHz, both in portable and docked modes. But let's go ahead to the docked mode and overclock the Switch and see what we can actually achieve. Starting out with a overclock of 1.4 GHz to the CPU does smooth out frame rates somewhat during movement, but the stutter is always present when new assets are streamed in. It doesn't matter how high I overclock the CPU, that stutter is always present. In fact, if I max overclock the CPU and GPU, the issue always occurs. So this is obviously the time it's taken to swap in the high-res assets, like on this billboard, for example. It doesn't make any difference. So this tells me that the main bottleneck really is RAM and memory bandwidth. And Virtuos themselves admitted they struggled fitting the game into the 3.2 gig of the Switch's system RAM. Now, in combat, the frame rates with max overclocking does not dip as anywhere near as low as on stock clocks. So it is an improvement, but it's not really as much as I thought it would be. In short, overclocking, while it does offer some gains, it's only really limited increases, and it's not necessarily the problem at hand. And once again, the Switch could really benefit from additional memory to really help Unreal Engine 4 games perform at a more optimal level of performance. Now, it's not just overclocking or lack of CPU performance. Another area where the game has been criticized is for its image quality. It just doesn't look good. Many things have been cut from the game, and comparing quality of the Switch version to even the base Xbox One VCR or PlayStation 4 version is a significant reduction in quality. But the good news here is that because the game does run on Unreal Engine 4, modders have already come up with configuration patches that can boost quality of the game without significant performance drops, and by applying overclocking can effectively keep that level of performance to roughly the same as it is on a stock Outer Worlds game running on a stock Nintendo Switch. So what do these patches actually give us? Well, the list is quite substantial, but I'll read out the important ones. Increased distance of the static LODs, the drawing distance overall, dynamic shadow resolution, the grass and textures, the ground textures have been increased, the quality of materials, lens flare reflections have been added, and more features have also been applied to portable and dock mode. Now, the result is a much nicer image, certainly more in line than what we expected. In this comparison, note the ground textures as well as an overall improved image quality. And the patch also enables depth of field. As you can see in this cutscene during dialogue, it's a little unclear why this feature was omitted on the stock version of the game, because I think it's a nice effect. It doesn't really seem to take away from any performance of the game, and in fact it masks any kind of background texture pop-in or asset loading in the background. So I think the depth of field omission was definitely an interesting one. I'd definitely like to see Virtuos consider bringing it back into the game. Now, this does have an impact on performance. With stock clocks, it does drop its frames more than a normal version of the game before the patch was applied. But applying a 1.2 gigahertz overclock to the CPU does keep the frame rate steady, and overall I much prefer this look. And in handheld mode, a patch has also been applied to increase the max dynamic resolution to 100%. So this basically means that we get 720p visuals with this patch applied more often, and overall it looks a lot cleaner. Now, it's recommended that in handheld mode you apply a 1.4 gigahertz overclock and boost the GPU to 537 megahertz. So this does obviously have an impact on heat, fan speed, and battery life, but you know, for those people that want the best image quality of the Outer Worlds that you can get today, this would be something that you would want to consider if you do have a modded Switch that you could apply overclocks to. Now, this does look really good in handheld mode, and I really like the way that these patches work. So what is the actual takeaway here? Is the Outer Worlds on the Switch a bad port? Well, no, not necessarily. I think Virtuos played it safe with some of these features, leaving them disabled, and I'd like to think that over time they're slowly going to optimize this game and provide patches for this game, and maybe start to turn on some of these graphical effects one by one and slowly improve the quality of the game. Now, I'm really hopeful that will be the case here, but of course, you know, I definitely want to see Virtuos optimize the game better and just, you know, make it look and run better overall, because I do think that this game is a bit of a disappointment overall. You know, it's something that could potentially look and run better with more time, but obviously, you know, Virtuos were under the hammer here really to get this game running on the Switch in the first place, you know, with its, you know, limited amount of memory and, you know, memory bandwidth, as well as the GPU and CPU that it had to work with. So with that said, you know, I think that we are starting to hit the limits of what's possible on the Nintendo Switch. Now, some of you guys may disagree with that, but I think Unreal Engine 4 games really need significant optimizations to work anywhere near a level of performance that we are expecting on the Switch. And I think that as we start to move into next-gen hardware, the Switch will definitely start to struggle to keep up with its current and next-gen ports. Now, I'm not saying anything about a Switch Pro or anything like that at this point, but what I guess what I am saying is maybe it is time, and I mentioned this in my previous video, that maybe it's time that Nintendo think about or consider a mid-season refresh or iteration of the Nintendo Switch. Or ultimately, you know, these ports are just not going to, you know, appear on the Switch, because as we start to move in more advanced ways of CPU and GPU technology, the Switch is going to kind of just, you know, be left behind. But I'll leave you guys with one major question, and that is, does everything really need to run on the Switch? Why does Virtuos come out and claim that they can do anything, they can make anything run on the Switch, current gen and next gen? Why would you want to do that? I mean, the Switch is obviously geared for some really awesome games, and it's very well tailored to a certain style of game, but for these kind of sprawling, big, open worldish style games that run on Unreal Engine, it's not necessarily the right target platform for those style of games to live on the Switch. Again, I'm not knocking Virtuos for the Outer Worlds. I do think that the port was very ambitious to begin with, and what they have delivered is decent, but I do want to see improvements made over time to really, you know, get this game looking a lot better. And as we've seen with some patches that can be applied, you can really increase the level of quality on the game without too much performance degradation, and hopefully Virtuos will consider doing these types of patches in the game going forward. Well guys, I'm going to leave it here for this video. I want to hear your thoughts about my findings on the Outer Worlds. Has this changed your mind about the game? Do you like the Outer Worlds on the Nintendo Switch? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always guys, if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.